first behind the scenes, we had a little look at the lighting side of the video. Now we want to talk more about audio, MIDI, and have a closer look at the Ableton project itself. Ableton is such an instrument in itself, and there's so many different ways of using it. Again, I'm sure there are much better options of doing certain things, but here's what worked for me. Compared to my first drum loop video, the setup on the second one is quite a bit smaller. I only use my main drum kit and my electronic drum pad. The main difference is that this time I didn't use the launch pad to control Ableton, but did it all on the Yamaha DTX Multi 12. Instead of a more conventional standalone way, I only used the drum pad as a MIDI controller. The top 3 pads are only used to navigate through the project, so I can launch certain scenes, certain clips, or start and stop recording loops that I lay on top of each other. The other 6 drum pads are simply used as MIDI nodes for the instruments. As I've mentioned in the other video, this drum pad has a layering function, which allows me to trigger up to 4 different MIDI nodes from different MIDI channels by hitting just one drum pad. This came in handy a couple of times, as you'll see later. Let's have a look at the MIDI tracks first. We've got the bass, we've got the belts from the beginning, we've got the melody, we've got 4 more belts tracks that we used during the breakdown, and the counter melody at the end of the breakdown. All these MIDI channels have drum racks in them with pre-prepared samples. I prefer to do it this way because I think it's easier to be in control of the note length, which is quite important, especially for melodies. The layout of the project might look a bit random, and it certainly changed on an hourly basis while I was preparing it. But I simply wanted to have all the instruments on separate tracks so I would have more options in the mix. Now let's have a look at the audio tracks. Up to 2 minutes and 4, everything you hear is played live. After that, we have a little bass and guitar come in to help fill up the sound. Then after the dropout, we have some more guitars and synth come in to lay on top of all the loops. All the live drums are going into a Presonus desk, which also acts as a MIDI interface, and from there they're going straight back into Ableton. In here I put all the channels in the group, simply to save some space. If I open this up, we can see all the individual tracks. At the end of the breakdown, I do a little live acoustic drum looping. First it's the toms, then it's the rim clicks. The signal flow for this in Ableton becomes very clear when I open the send and return panels. I simply send the required microphones onto 2 separate return channels and use those as inputs for 2 new audio tracks. This allows me to loop those mixes just as any other audio track. The last track we have is a cue track, which is simply an audio cue that counts me out of the drum solo. I pre-decided the length for that so I wouldn't go on for ages. For me it was important to be able to perform the whole song without having to look at a computer screen, so from the first till the last note I'm controlling everything with the drum pad. The whole navigation is a mixture of launching separate clips or full scenes. Depending on the situation in the song, one or the other became more handy. This is where the layering function in the drum pad came in very handy. It, for example, allowed me to stop a recording, start a new one, send a program change, and start a lighting clip, all at the hit of just one drum pad. As mentioned before, I'm using MIDI channel 4 for the lights, MIDI channel 10 for everything else. I simply did that to keep the two apart and to give me more MIDI notes to work with. As you can see, I'm using quite a lot of different MIDI notes. That meant I ended up having to use 9 different patches on the electronic drum pad. Again, because I didn't want to have to press any buttons changing them, I let Ableton do the work for me. For this I simply use a MIDI channel, which I call program change. The clips on this channel appear to be empty, but if we have a look at the program change section down here, we can see that Ableton is sending the required patch changes directly to the drum pad. This means whatever scene I'm in, I don't have to worry about having the correct patch selected. A little challenge I found was the music dropout after the solo. Due to the global quantization and the way I had set up the project, I couldn't really find an easy way of stopping clips mid-sequence and still keep them in time for the outro. My workaround was to MIDI map the track activators down here. With the hit of a pad I can now mute the selected channels. When I hit the pad to launch the outro, I simply turn them back on. The whole performance is recorded straight back into Ableton. I simply hit the arrangement record button up here, and Ableton captures everything I do straight into my arrangement view. Later on I can decide if I want to mix with an Ableton or export all the stems and do it in a different program. And that's pretty much all there is to it. I hope this little overview made some kind of sense. If you have any more questions, get in touch, I'm always happy to help. Thanks for watching.